Hello there, welcome to the Tournament Center here at the World Championship. Marshall Sutcliffe with Randy Buehler. Randy, we're transitioning into the last stage of the tournament, and I think you could be pretty fair in saying it's the most important one. It's going to determine who makes our top four, and it's also what they're going to play in the top four. It's standard. So we thought we would take a few minutes here to take a look at the standard metagame overview. You can take a look at standard as a format here. It's big. This is about as big as standard gets.
It's as big as it's ever going to get for a while, right? New rotation kicking in next year. You're only going to see 18 months worth of sets instead of 2 years worth of sets. So 8 sets, kind of crazy big. Last time we'll have a standard this big.
Yeah, and usually what happens, and it is in fact the case here, is that when you have this many sets all in one, it gets more powerful.
Definitely.
More options, the decks get more concentrated, and we do expect some pretty powerful stuff here. Though this standard format is relatively well explored.
Right, we had Pro Tour Origins, and Origins had a huge impact on the field. Like, I think that going into that Pro Tour, I don't know, I mean, the pros figured out very quickly, you know, Hangar Backwalker is huge. You can play mono red with the Abbott, with Exquisite Firecraft. We saw the blue-red artifacts deck come seemingly out of nowhere with flying scissors taking over the metagame.
I know a bunch of the teams were trying to play Jace.
Jace was a huge
not
card.
finding super many spots for it, but they were really trying to push it. There was a lot of cards. I remember when Origins came out, I thought, okay, Dragons made a huge splash in Standard, bigger than I thought, but Origins actually surpassed like how much I thought it would change versus how much it did. Agreed. It didn't change quite as much as Dragons did, but still, it was a much bigger impact than I anticipated.
But now we've had a couple of weeks since then, as we're going to see from this metagame, like, this is not the Pro Tour metagame. This is not, like, what was the mono red versus blue-red artifacts, you know, green devotion everywhere. Things have changed a little bit in the last few weeks.
Yeah, now the players, many of them have teamed up. Right, teams of 3 and 4 grouped up, tested together, and many of them have even decided to play the same deck as each other.
Yeah, I know. So the way we're going to handle this overview is we can't tell you which players are on the decks because the players do not get deck lists for the first round of Standard. Like, the players do get to share deck lists after the first round, but we're going to tell you how many people are playing each, but we're not going to tell you sort of which teams have lined up with which deck lists because the players aren't supposed to get that information before the first round of Standard.
All right, well, why don't we dive in here and get a look at some of the things that you saw. Now, see the Hedron up there.
The Hedron here. This is how many players are on this archetype.
Now remember, we've got 24 total players here in the field, so only one showed up with Red-Green Dragons.
Red-Green Dragons, which, I mean, this is your classic ramp deck, right? You've got Rattleclaw Mystic, you've got, you know, Elf on turn 1, you're ramping into Thunderbreak Regent, you're ramping into Stormbreath Dragon, you've got Burn to remove their creatures, you've got Crater's Claws to kind of finish off and potentially go over the top. It's a pretty clean ramp deck, and of course, Den Protector Deathmist Raptor synergy has been around for a little while in Standard now. Gives you a little bit of ability to grind out a game. What this deck is not is, it's not Green Devotion.
Right, much different.
And in fact, you're not going to see a Green Devotion slide.
Really?
There are actual 0 Green Devotion decks in this field.
Very popular deck in this Standard format of late, even after the Pro Tour. Nobody?
Not a 1.
I'm surprised by that. Yeah, this deck has the ability to accrue a lot of incidental damage as well. You know, the Draconic Roars here help pile on a little extra damage. Your Thunderbreak Regent, sure, they killed it, but it's even more damage. And then you start whacking them with these things, and it gets done pretty quick.
Now, the next slide's kind of interesting because there's 0 Green Devotion decks, but assuming I remember the order of the archetypes
let's see what the
correctly,
next one is.
There are actually some Nykthoses floating around.
And not green, because green has really been the Nykthos color.
That's been the Devotion deck, right?
We had blue Devotion decks back in the day, but that's stuff over. So we'll see what this next one is. I'm surprised to hear you say that. I would have, whoa, I'm really surprised to see that. White Devotion, did not expect that.
Have you seen Archangel of Tides? Look how many white mana
That is
pits.
a lot of white mana symbols on that card. Interesting. So how does this thing work?
It's kind of an aggressive white weenie deck. In a sense, I may be biased by the fact that the first place I saw this deck was actually in Craig Wesco's hands. Craig came up a little bit short of making it to Worlds, but he was at the WMCQ last weekend in Philadelphia, and Craig actually made the top 8 of the WMCQ, the World Magic Cup qualifier, with a mono white deck.
We see a new toy here, Knight of the White Orchid.
There's several new toys. Yeah. Archangel of Tides, brand new toy.
What's the payoff here, though?
Mastery of the Unseen lets you sink a bunch of mana in.
Dump a bunch of mana into Mastery.
Yeah, no, it's Mastery of the Unseen.
Because there's no Dragon Lord Atarka type card for white, right? I mean, they just don't get the over the top, but that does the job.
You go wide. Yeah,
Yeah, I
Mastery
love
is
that.
very good. And you also have just a very nice curve of white creatures that happen to have a bunch of white mana pips. I mean, if you're playing a mono-white deck anyway, like throw 3 Nykthos in. They're like the colorless lands in your aggro deck.
Sure.
Doesn't take a ton of payoff, but sometimes you get it all together and you just get to go super wide.
You know, I think a lot of people were waiting to see this card in Standard when it first got printed. It clearly has the stats, but the triple white is tough, right?
The other thing that Archangel does that I think makes it even a little better now than people thought at first is Hangar Backwalker tokens. You have to pay for them.
Oh, that is annoying.
Right? It's the enemy Hangar Back. Maybe it does bust up into all of its parts. Archangel makes that a little less effective.
Yeah, great card, Archangel of Tithes.
Only one of these, but
Yeah.
but it's here. We'd be very interested to see how it does.
All right, let's see what else we have here. Atarka Red. All right, now this goes back, rewind to
Yes.
2 Pro Tours ago. Martin Dang won it with this.
Right. I mean, Team Tomo has essentially won 2 Pro Tours with red aggro decks, right?
Yep.
Yul wins with the mono red in Vancouver. Martin Dang won with a Tarka red. There aren't any copies of the Yul Larson style mono red in the field.
Okay.
0 copies. The red aggro decks, the 2 that are here to play, have the green splash for a Tarka's command. You know, also, of course, the Become Immense.
The one of?
The Misers Become Immense. They can just brain somebody out of left field.
That card is so nasty. Yeah, I mean, really though, this is effectively a mono red deck in its core.
Just a very light
but it's
green
got
splash.
this card in it here, which can pile on a huge amount of damage for just 2 mana.
And of course, all the new toys from Origins go in. It's not like it's Martin Dang's deck just, dusted off and pulled off the shelf. You get Abbot of Carol Keep, right? You get Exquisite Firecraft. Like, you get all the Origins toys to sort of upgrade that list for this event.
Nice. Yeah, this one ends up being a little more token-based, too, than like the deck that we saw from Yul Larson, right? It wants to play multiple creatures to take advantage of
Yeah,
that
Rabble
Tarkus
Masters
command.
being the most powerful, but definitely.
Okay.
Going wide with the Tarkus command, still pretty good.
All right, let's see what we have up next here. All right, a relative newcomer to the standard scene, Hangarback Obzon. This did really well at GP London.
Absolutely. I mean, you say pretty well at GP London. It finished first and second. They played for the title in the Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, and there were 2 others in the top 8, and it finished 9th. So 5 of the top 9 decks, including both of the final decks.
Yikes.
Like, all of a sudden, that was the week after the Pro Tour, and basically this deck, if you've been following Standard for a while, take your Abzan aggro deck, right? Lose the black-green piece. Hangar Backwalker comes in as just a better, more consistent 2-drop, easier to cast with your mana, and all of a sudden, deck dominates the Grand Prix, and it didn't really go away. Like, if you look at WMCQ results from last weekend, this deck, even with a target on its forehead, was still putting up decent results. Only 3 players have chosen to run it here, and I think that is because this is the biggest target. Like, this to me is, the defining deck in Standard. Not the Standard's defined by one deck. It's a pretty diverse Standard, but like, if you had to pick the deck that you were most likely to run into,
like in this snapshot in time, it's this one.
The first deck you want to test against in your gauntlet to find out if your deck can't hang with this, maybe you need a new plan. Yeah. So yeah, Hangar Backwalkers, Siege Rhinos are obviously insane. It's a nice aggressive curve of creatures, topping out with those Hangar Backs and Siege Rhinos.
Death Dealers out, Hangar Backs in, and off they go.
Pretty much Death Dealer out, Hangar Back in.
Okay, let's take a look at our next.
Yeah, it turns out we aren't done with the Siege Rhinos.
Yeah, that guy doesn't go away easily. Obzon Control, 5 people on Obzon Control?
5 people on Obzon Control. So that's 8 Siege Rhino decks.
Does this represent the safe choice to you then? Like, is this, if you didn't really know what to play, you're like, this deck is obviously good. It has game against everything. It has got a solid plan from the beginning of the game to the end of the game.
Right.
I'll just play Obzon Control.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you could argue that even the line between the Hangarback Obzon, which is effectively the aggro version, and the control version, like, I don't know where mid-range is in control, and you could argue that, Siege Rhinos are just the dominant cards in this field, and so it's just a question of, do you like your Siege Rhinos with more control-ish cards, with Planeswalkers and Sweepers, and Languish, obviously. You want to talk about Siege Rhino synergy. Your guys have 4/5, let's give everybody -4/-4. Yeah, that works out pretty well as a sweeper.
Almost
that
says
just
kill everything else.
Just very close.
Yeah.
So yeah, fully 5 players feel like, I want Thought Seizes, I want Languish to keep the aggro decks in check, but I also want to have my own Siege Rhinos and
this just
my
seems
own
like
Dromoka's
a
commands.
solid middle ground deck here, right? I mean, it's hard to say that this deck has like a huge edge on any given field. There's certain decks that this one's very good against, but I don't know. I think if it were me and I just didn't want to take any big risks or take any big shot at the metagame, I'd probably land about here.
Makes sense.
And 5 people agreed. Let's take a look at our next one here and see. Esper Dragons. Now this one's a little different.
That's a big number.
Players, wow.
That's a big number for Esper Dragons. This is not a deck that really showed up at this Pro Tour. It showed up at the previous Pro Tour. When Dragons came out, Esper Dragons was a thing, and it was clearly the best deck, a couple of Pro Tours ago. But I think what's going on is that people believe they can beat the Hangar Back Obzon deck here. You look at the Obzon decks that are out there, and you go up to bigger dragons and some counter spells. You've got Faltong Invocation, you've got Silumgar Scorn, which is just a great counterspell. I mean, sometimes Force Spike's good enough. Obviously, if you have a dragon, it's just a true counterspell. You get the power of Dig Through Time in your deck. I actually think this might be the call. Like, you might have landed on Abzan. I would have been really tempted to go back to just give me some counterspells. Give me the ability to say no in a field like this. It's not the most aggressive set of decks. I mean, you look at how we've got here, right? There were only one ramp deck, 2 red aggros, only 3 of the Obzon aggros with hanger backs. I think this might be a good field for Esper Dragons.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it would be very heavily dependent on what you expected, right? If you expected a lot of small, tiny creature decks, this deck's pretty good against those. The Obzon deck's very good against those as well, though. And I'm curious to see. This one feels a little riskier to me, right? Like, if I was more confident than the Obzon control version, if I was more confident about this, about what the metagame looked like, and I thought it was favorable, I would take this deck.
Sure.
But I think if it was like, we've been testing Modern Masters all weekend, I just did an Origins draft, and I've got a Modern deck over here I still need to figure out a sideboard for, I'd probably default to the more middle ground choice. But if I did think that there was going to be a whole lot of mid-ground type decks, I would play this one.
All right, so let's see if anybody can figure this out. There's only, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, there's only one deck left.
Whenever you say that, you always remember it correctly. Not to
good.
set it up too high for you, but
There's 7 players on one remaining deck. What's left?
who knows?
We haven't seen.
We have a 1 mil
Sphinx's
vote.
tutelage vote.
It won a GP, right?
Right.
Maybe they're just like, I want to do that.
No.
7 mil decks.
That would be a crazy number of Sphinx's tutelage decks. We haven't seen any of the Sultai controlled decks. We haven't seen
no
any
Sultai.
Sidisi's.
No Sultai at all, right?
We haven't seen any Green Devotion decks. Like, if I hadn't already said there's no Green Devotion, you could imagine, right? Green Devotion would be sitting on top
That
of
would be
the
my
metagame.
guess. I would assume there'd be a Tarka decks for the rest.
And
Yeah.
other guesses?
No.
Oh, Green White's a great guess.
Green White's a good
right?
guess.
The Brian Kibler deck, Green White Megamorph has been doing a lot.
Coming
it
off
could
of
have
the
been
GP.
Thopters.
I heard Thopters out there too.
Let's show it.
Show it to him. Jessguy?
Jessguy.
Hello, Jessguy. Where have you been? 7 people?
7
playing?
players. That's like 3 different teams worth of players at least. All came to exactly the same conclusion. Jace on turn 2, Mantis Rider on turn 3. These are pretty aggressive Jessguy decks. They're not necessarily maxing out on Dig Through Times, although they're happy to have it.
Have you looked at these lists? I don't want to
glanced at the lists.
Ascendancies?
No.
These are the more middle ground.
It's kind of tempo. And in my mind, leaning aggressive. They're not maxing on Dig Through Times. They are masking on Soulfire Grandmasters and Jaces and Mantis Riders and just burn your creatures, attack you with mine. I think this flying ability could be really good.
It's huge.
In a field full of Hangar Backwalkers and Siege Rhinos.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we've been keeping an eye on this Jessguy deck. It's popped up from time to time in Standard. It feels like, if you compare it to Obzon, for example, right? You've got this huge swath of cards to choose from if you're going to play an Obzon deck, and you can tune it how you want. In fact, we have 2 different versions of the deck here that do overlap a bit, but not that much. Jessguy's card pool is smaller, right? They don't have as wide of a choice here, but when it's right, there is a deck here, and as long as it's good for the metagame, you don't have as much wiggle room, but if it is right, it's here. I mean, these cards are all great, and everything in this deck, once you get this many gold cards that have 3 mana symbols, your power level is very high. It's just a matter of if that's what you want to be doing for
I will say, one of the cards I think is going to be crucial to this metagame decision is a monocolor card. It's this Stormbreath Dragon. Right, it flies over the Hangerbacks, it flies over the Siege Rhinos.
No Obzon Charms.
It doesn't die to Obzon Charms.
Yeah, it's
that
huge.
is huge. How many? We had 2 different slides for Obzon decks, right? There's what, 8 copies of Obzon in the field? That's a third of the field.
They only have so many heroes downfalls. They do run out.
And people have been trimming the heroes downfalls.
Indeed.
Protection from white is going to be good. Flying is going to be good. Jessguy seems to be, that's the gambit. That's what many of these pros have decided is the weapon they want to attack Standard with this weekend.
I'm surprised.
Interesting stuff.
I I would have, if you would have set this up and said, what's this like? I would have said Green Devotion, not close. Like, I would have expected the number of Jessguy decks to be here between 1 and 0. Like, one person might be I'll run it, it's my favorite.
I can't remember the last time I saw a metagame that had Jessguy on top. I feel like we were in Hawaii, right? It was Pro Tour Khans of Tarkir was the last time Jessguy has been this big a stack of the metagame. So
this is a big picture
and
view
this is
of what
everything.
we're looking
There's
at here.
actually only 7 distinct decks getting played here. So many people went between odds on the Esper Dragons and the Jessguy. People lined up. I mean, some of that is going to happen inevitably with teams, but it's a pretty interesting take on what to do in Standard and how to attack. I feel like this is a threat. This was a big threat. This was a big threat that was expected. And then the Green Devotion, which isn't even on the list, was I think the other thing that people were really expecting to see and wanted to make sure they could beat.
Yeah, I know a lot of the players said that they spent the most amount of time on Standard. That this was where they felt the edge was the biggest and where they could really put their effort and actually see the results. I'm curious, Randy, let's say you're playing in the tournament, right?
Sure.
But here's the deal. You don't have a Standard deck yet.
Okay.
So I walk up to you and I say, this.
Okay.
What do you want? You get to pick one of these slots to be you.
Oh, I have to pick one of these decks?
But you know that this is the metagame.
If I see this metagame, I want to be down here.
You want to be the quick deck,
I want to be playing mono red aggro. Like, everybody is kind of loaded. I feel like people are loaded for control. People are playing control to go over the top of the mid-range decks. And so I just want to be way, way faster. Like, you don't want to play mid-range in this field. I think you want to come underneath with the red. If I knew this was the metagame, yeah, I'd be shuffling up Yoel's deck. I'd be looking at, updating Martin Deng's deck.
What do you guys like? What do you like? You'd play the mill deck? Esper
Dragons
Dragons all the way, so he's got to vote for that. He's sticking to his guns. What about you? Abzan?
Yeah.
Oh, Abzan gets booze.
I like it.
That's kind of brutal. What would you play? Mono. He wants mono. He's with you, Randy. He's picking up one of these decks at the bottom. I kind of like your take on it there. I mean, obviously you don't get this information if you're testing for the World Championships normally.
I probably would have landed here, but...
All right, well, that's going to do it for the standard metagame breakdown. Randy, thanks for taking the time to dive into the numbers for us. I know it's useful for everybody at home. But that's going to do it for the Tournament Center.